Hey guys, welcome to a new class of contemporary Spanish politics. Today we're going to continue talking about the economy and whether, well, Spanish economy, a new hope, is it there or not. Actually, in last class, if you remember, we talked about the economic history. We more or less went through the economic history from the time Spain has been a democracy up until 2008, when the economic crisis started. And then we also talked a little bit about how the Spanish economy looked like, which are the most important sectors and how that more or less affects the economy. And today, obviously, we're going to take it from where we left it. Actually, we left it with the global financial crisis 2008. And we're going to talk about a few economic crisis indicators. By the end of the day, the indicators of the Spanish economy. And then we're going to talk about the economic policies that were put in place that took us out of the crisis. Actually, tomorrow, I should be talking to you about how we came out of the crisis. And that's when we're going to be able to answer that question, whether there's a new hope for the Spanish economy or not. Actually, quite interesting today. I'm one day late filming this video because yesterday I was in a webinar on the social impact of the lockdown, and obviously that's going to be input into tomorrow's class, and I think is quite interesting, and actually how we'll discuss how it affects inequality, etc., and how these crisis is going to affect the economy. So let's get started. Actually, before we start with the indicators per se, we're going to talk about some structural weaknesses that actually, when we address the structure of the Spanish economy, we more or less already could anticipate. We talked about the importance of the housing market. And actually, what you can see there on the slides is the prices of houses, actually. And you can see how it grew over 30% per year in the years before the crisis. That was, obviously that was a bubble, and that's something. I've talked to this for Spain. Obviously the US also had a similar thing with subprime, but when the prices of the houses are growing 30% a year, you can imagine that everyone is investing in the housing market. Everyone is willing to, to get into that business. And by the end of the day, the return of that business is incredible. And people were not only buying second houses, but also investing in new housing. And obviously that's going to have consequences. You can see how every year in Spain, up until 2005, they were building over 600,000 houses a year. That, for a population of 47 million, you can make the maths there. You can understand how unsustainable that is. Obviously, prices dropped after once the economic crisis started, but that was obvious. And obviously, people, by the end of the day, getting into mortgages to pay for these houses, that also exposed the banking sector, because if people defaulted, they will be left with the asset, with the house, and obviously that has no liquidity, so you cannot cash that, and so banks will eventually have a cash flow problem, and that you will see that is what happened in Spain. The other structural weakness of the Spanish economy, you know about it, is a labor market. And how easily we destroy, and how easily we're going to create jobs as well, but how easily we destroy jobs, and that has to do with temporary jobs. The more temporary jobs, the easier there will be to be destroyed. And actually, there you can see in the left-hand side of the slide, you can see a comparison between the European Union and Spain in that sense, the temporary jobs and how actually they are destroyed. The more temporary jobs, the easier they will be to destroy. And obviously, these temporary jobs are mostly in construction, housing, and also services, and obviously low-skilled jobs, low-skilled services. Obviously here we're not talking about the big four or anything like that, consultancy. So let's talk a little bit about the indicators and how we look like. This is a graph that you've already seen in the previous class, and where the unemployment levels got. But you can see how just before the crisis, how in 2007, Spain got to its minimum in terms of unemployment. Because we do not consider this time, this was a transition, that time figures were not accurate enough. But we got to 7.9 unemployment, and that was the record lowest. But you can also see how easily jobs were destroyed, how, I mean, the economic crisis started 2008, and obviously the job market could see that coming already, and how these were skyrocketed up until 2013 when we hit 27.2. And you will see later that that's actually something very, well, not very unique because Italy was the same, but how actually there was an aftershock in 2011 of the economic crisis, and both Spain and Italy felt it. And unemployment pretty much show it. Also GDP, and how GDP decreased, and actually it seems that we recovered. Actually, other countries did. The United States, Germany, or France started recovering in 2010, but Spain or Italy had a little bit more to suffer, and GDP was still destroyed up until 2014. That was really the year when we started recovering. Public debt, a very important indicator. Actually, the levels of public debt before the economic crisis in Spain were relatively low in comparison with other European countries, even with Germany or other countries that score better than us. And actually, after the crisis right now, if we take current data, we are around over 100% of our GDP in terms of public debt. And actually, this is one of the problems that many countries might be facing now, that their public debt is very, very high, also because of how recent the previous economic crisis is. So actually, obviously, this increased with the crisis, and public deficit, that is not the debt itself, but actually how much the debt you produce every year. And you can see how we started, how we entered deficit from 2008, and now actually the state has to spend more. Obviously, more subsidies have to be paid. People will be unemployed, no money entering the system because less taxes are collected, and obviously that's this story. And we're still in deficit. However, the deficit is more or less under control. It's close to 2%. Once again, this is going to go out of hand with this new economic crisis hitting us as we are speaking. And last but not least, the last indicator is the risk premium. Actually, in Spain, we compare it with the German bond. So actually, this has to do with the interest that country has to finance its bonds. So if Spain tries to sell public debt in the financial markets, what interest is it going to pay for this debt? How, and this is basically calculated and the likelihood of Spain defaulting this debt. Actually, you can see at the point, particularly 2012, you will see that actually that's when Spain had to bail out its banks. These hit a maximum over 600 points of risk premium, and now we are it's more or less controlled. That's a level more or less previous to the crisis. This was more or less this was it about the economic indicators of the crisis. You get more or less a picture of how big this crisis was in Spain. After the break, we are going to be talking about the economic policies that took us out of this economic crisis. So see you in a minute.